The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share information and provide some additional expertise as we develop a deeper understanding of Mr. Von Cohorn's behavior and try to ascertain definitively whether Mr. Von Cohorn harmed any children. Please know that the district is committed to being as open and transparent as possible. We will share as much information as we can and provide as many resources as we are able as we work through this event. Tonight's agenda includes a presentation by Dr. Barbara Rickler. As I noted in the letter I sent August 21st, Dr. Rickler is a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. She's a clinical instructor at the Yale Child Student Center and operates a private practice in a nearby community. Dr. Rickler is widely regarded in the state and serves as a psychiatric consultant to a number of school districts. Also joining us this evening is our school resource officer, Rich Ross. Rich is a member of the Wilton Police Department with whom we have been in daily contact, and we are working with them as we learn new information. I'd also like to take just a moment to recognize our Board of Education, Chairman Bruce Likely, Vice Chair Christine Finkelstein, Secretary Laura Schwemm, and members Lori Rothstein, Chris Straub, and Glenn Hemmerly. At the table this evening is also Ms. Ann Paul, our Assistant Superintendent for Special Services. This evening, we'll begin with a presentation by Dr. Rickler. When Dr. Rickler concludes, I have a series of questions that have come in over the last number of days. I will go through that list of questions, and then we'll open up the floor to any additional questions. Our goal is to provide you with as much information as possible and to help you feel reassured about the safety procedures and protocols we have in place here in Wilton Public Schools. There is a possibility that some parents may have questions that we can't answer. If that is the case, it won't be because we don't want to answer. It'll be because we either don't know the answer or we are bound by confidentiality restrictions. My hope is that we're able to address parents' fears and concerns and provide a process for having any specific concerns addressed. Now, before I invite Dr. Rickler to the podium, I'd like to share with you some new information that I learned this afternoon. I received a phone call from the attorney, Jason Sheffield, who is representing Mr. Von Cohorn. He called me at the request of Detective John Carrero, the state police officer who's conducting the investigation into Mr. Von Cohorn's online behavior. Attorney Sheffield noted that he is deeply aware of the concerns many of us have about the questions as to whether Mr. Von Cohorn physically harmed any children. He reported that Mr. Von Cohorn volunteered to submit to a polygraph test and responded to questions about his interactions with children. Attorney Sheffield reported that the results of the polygraph supported his own belief that Mr. Von Cohorn did not inappropriately touch any children. The information shared by Attorney Sheffield supports what we know so far, and that is that we have not yet learned any information that would lead us to believe Mr. Von Cohorn was inappropriate with any children while an employee here at Wilton Public Schools. As you may have read in the letters I sent to the community, and you will hear again tonight, we have put in place a process to investigate any specific concerns raised by parents. At this time, I'd like to invite to the podium Dr. Barbara Rickler. When she concludes, I'll return to review the questions that I've received. Welcome, Dr. Rickler.
Well, thank you for honoring me with this invitation. I've been doing consultation work for the Wilton Board of Education for over 20 years, so I'm very familiar with the schools and the students and families that are here, and I've also often gotten over the years to know the staff, and I've always been very impressed with their level of integrity. During the past 96 hours or so since I found out that I was going to be here tonight, I've been doing some more research and learning myself about this subject. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned, because there were certain terms that I heard when I was first told about this investigation that I knew nothing about. So I'm going to try and share that information with you. So I'm just going to start with a summary. The incident at Miller Driscoll School in Wilton involves Mr. Von Cohorn, a preschool paraprofessional of 7 years. He's charged with possession and distribution of child pornography. No offenses took place on school property, and when school administrators found out about the investigation by law enforcement, they handled it exceptionally, putting him on administrative leave immediately. There's no evidence that Mr. Von Cohorn sexually or physically abused any children. The scientific research shows that this is common of child pornography users, as less than 20% are thought to commit hands-on offenses. While in the heat of the moment, parents may want additional measures to be taken, none would have prevented this issue from happening. Unfortunately, preventing or identifying individuals who have no criminal background and commit their crimes at home is an extremely difficult task. The district has safeguards in place to ensure student safety. Peer supervision among teachers, which is already in place at Miller Driscoll, seems to be the best preventive measure. So just a few case details that I'll go over about the charges. There's a charge of first-degree possession of child pornography. So let me tell you what that means. First degree means 50 or more images or one or more images depicting infliction of serious physical injury. Now, each possession charge is a felony, and if convicted, each requires some form of sexual offender registration, sex offender probation and treatment, and mandatory jail time. With the popularity of internet movies and movie clips, especially in the online pornography business, the law actually considers a 2-minute internet movie or video to be a compilation of hundreds of images. Now, in terms of the definitions and the age, by the federal standards, child pornography refers to sexualized images of individuals under 18. Now, some states have lowered the bar to 16, but the federal standard and most of the people who are caught downloading child pornography are brought up on federal charges because there's a federal dragnet that I'll explain to you, and this is one of the things that I learned about. The standard is 18, under 18. Now, another thing that's important, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, is that there is a very, very detailed, as you review the literature, there's a very detailed topography of people who download child pornographic images, and this is often what researchers use to determine the seriousness of the offense and the likelihood that a person who downloaded child pornography also committed what we call any kind of contact offense. Now, one of the things that I learned in reviewing the material is that you have to be extremely careful, as in any scientific field, about interpreting statistics. So I'll give you an example. We might say that, people might say, is smoking marijuana a gateway to abusing heroin? So that might be a question that a researcher might ask. Now, the fact is that every person who is a heroin abuser almost invariably at some time in their life has smoked marijuana. So in that case, you might say there's 100% association. However, if you look at it from the other direction, which is that do marijuana users invariably become heroin users, the answer to that is most definitely no. A very, very small percentage. So something that can be a strong association in one direction may not be a very strong association in another. And that's what you begin to see the more you learn about this literature. So let me just go through a couple of points that people may have been asking over the first several days, which was, number one, was my child a victim, i.e. touched or photographed inappropriately? And the response would be no. According to Dr. Smith's August 20th letter, the authorities have informed us that there is no evidence that Mr. Von Cohorn produced pornography himself, and no Wilson children were photographed or harmed. Now, with Dr. Smith's statement about the lie detector test, it may add some further credibility beyond to that statement. Did anything happen on school property? No. According to Dr. Smith's August 20th letter, the charges stem from Mr. Von Cohorn's behavior at his residences and not while he was at work. He added the district monitors network access and all employees' internet usage that take place through our networks while at school. Question number 3, even if nothing physical happened to my child, how do I know that he wasn't thinking inappropriately about my child? To that, the response is, we don't know whether he had thoughts about your child, but we do know that his deviant behavior was enacted in his residence. So there's no thought police, but everything, all the available evidence right now points to that happening in his private residence. Fourth question, how do we know this won't happen again? According to an interview with Good Morning Wilton, Dr. Smith assured that given the structure of the building and the number of adults that are required to work with these preschool children, I don't think there's lots of time for adults to be alone with kids. There's a lot of peer supervision. I do believe that there was some behavior of some, I do believe that if there was some behavior that was of concern, it would have come to light and it would have been addressed. How did Mr. Von Cohorn get hired in the first place? Excuse me. According to that letter of August 20th from Dr. Smith, Mr. Von Cohorn underwent a thorough background check prior to gaining employment at the Wilton Public Schools in 2007, and there were no red flags or records of previous illegal behavior that surfaced. Question number 6. If teachers are going to supervise or monitor each other, what should they be looking for? There are no clear-cut signs that someone uses child pornography. However, research suggests that the risk to commit a hands-on sexual crime results from the interplay between deviant sexual interests, antisocial tendencies, and difficulty in the ability to control one's behavior. So back to this idea that, and I hope it doesn't sound in any way like I'm trying to minimize someone downloading child pornography, because that's an obvious problem and that's what got us here to this meeting in the first place. But in terms of the research demonstrating what are the factors that move people into more contact offenses, the picture is much more complicated than that, and there tend to be other factors that need to be present. And the last question, how do we move forward? What do we need to do? And I think that, as Dr. Smith said in his letter, the district is committed to the safety of Wilton's children, and Mr. Von Cohorn will not be permitted to be around your children. Well, that's obvious. But we're also going to get into maybe talking about other things to look for. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about potential proposed solutions that parents may have been thinking or talking about with each other over time. One potential solution is stricter enhanced background checks, for example, lie detector tests and pre-hiring mental health evaluations. Is that a reasonable consideration? And I'm going to tell you what the pros and cons are of each suggestion. The pro of that is that the greater likelihood of identifying individuals who are at risk for deviant behavior, but this is not a guarantee. So you're increasing the effectiveness of the filter by doing pre-hiring lie detector tests and mental health evaluations. So that could be a possible advantage. However, the disadvantage is that it is expensive, it's time-consuming, and may actually deter qualified applicants. Often the applicant has to pay for these evaluations pre-employment. And ultimately, the question is, would this have prevented the present incident? Possibly. Okay. Another potential idea that someone might have is, are more frequent background checks provided? So by the way, I'm taking some of these questions from ones that had been submitted to Dr. Paul and Dr. Rapchinsky. So the positive of that intervention is that the district would be aware of any new offenses. Offenses related to the safety of students would be brought to the district's attention at the time of the investigation, as happened in this case. The disadvantage is that it's expensive, would only identify individuals who had an official record of any illegal behavior during the time of their employment. So the ultimate question again, would this have prevented the present incident? And the answer to that is no. Another thing, video cameras throughout the school. A positive, record all incidents that could, and that the presence of those video cameras could potentially act as a deterrent. The negative. This raises many issues of privacy, especially in areas like the bathroom. Unlike a high school where cameras are used to monitor incidents between students or on a bus, in a preschool they'd be used solely to monitor teachers, which does not create a trusting work atmosphere. Would this have prevented the present incident? No. Teachers have to pair up when dealing with students. A positive is that increased peer monitoring and supervision could be a good thing. A potential perpetrator would not be alone with a child. Excuse me. The con is that it's a very inefficient use of staff. It would not have prevented this current episode. Another thing that someone might bring up that had been raised with a question is, should there be screening about gay teachers? Are there any pros to that? Absolutely not. Are there cons? Absolutely. Discrimination. There's no relationship between being a pedophile and/or child pornography use and homosexuality. Would have had no bearing on this situation whatsoever. Another question, no unnecessary touching. In other words, no hugs, no lap sitting, and no holding hands. The pro of that is that it reduces physical contact with staff. The con, which is something I take very, very seriously, is that it reduces the nurturing aspect necessary for a successful preschool. It inhibits teachers' ability to help kids also pull up their pants in the bathroom and help them with their clothes when they need it, but really creates a very, very different kind of environment in a preschool, which seems to be antithetical to the goals that are being promoted. Would that have in any way, not having contact, would that in any way have prevented Mr. Von Cohorn's use of child pornography in his residence? No. Now, as far as child pornography use and pedophilia, there were a lot of questions that were submitted about that. According to a 2012 review by forensic psychiatrist Alberto Temperini, child pornography offenses have increased dramatically over the past 10 years, even as the rates of child sexual abuse have decreased significantly in the same period. So porn has gone up, child sexual offenses have gone down. This raises a very interesting research question, which is the widespread, by the way, child pornography, unfortunately, is an industry in our country that is worth billions of dollars. The internet is not supervised. No one owns the internet. Anybody can get on these networks, and it also behooves us to think very carefully for those people who have middle schoolers and high schoolers, or even younger children who are very adept at using the computer. You would be shocked at how, if you don't already know this, how easy it is to get onto these networks. And since 1995, when child pornography became widely available on the internet, there's been an explosion of this industry. Well, Dr. Temperini acknowledged recent studies which have highlighted a relationship between pedophilia and possession of child pornography. He also wrote that a large number of individuals express their sexual interest in children by collecting child pornography and never engage in contact offenses. A German study a couple of years earlier concluded that consuming child pornography alone is not a risk factor for committing hands-on offenses, at least not for those subjects who have never committed a hands-on offense before. However, the research on this is not unequivocal. In 2007, a New York Times investigation noticed that previous studies based on surveys of criminal records estimated that 30 to 40% of those arrested for possessing child pornography also had molested children. So as you can see, you know, the information is not unequivocal. The thing that everybody agrees on is that collecting child pornography is not an automatic gateway to committing hands-on offenses. The differences in the literature allude to what the percentage is of people who move in that direction and what are some of the adverse conditions in the background of those people which may suggest that shift. But again, in this idea of carefully looking at statistics, it's important to look at the population that has been studied. Most of the studies are based on prison populations. So by virtue of that, the data is skewed in the direction of looking at the worst offenders. So that's certainly going to affect the numbers. Okay, so now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about characteristics of child pornography users. Am I doing okay as far as time is concerned? I don't want to take up too much time? Okay. All right. So some characteristics of child pornography users. The one thing that the literature seems to agree on is that child pornography offenders are a heterogeneous group of individuals with different levels of risk for contact offenses. As to whether or not online and contact offenders are similar, evidence exists on both sides of the debate. In a 2011 study, the characteristics of online sexual offenders, essentially a meta-analysis was done. Canadian researchers outlined common traits among online offenders. They found that compared with offline offenders, one, they were more likely to be Caucasian. Two, they were likely to be younger, and that may be because younger people tend to be more adept in the online world. Three, they were less likely to have experienced physical abuse. The rates of childhood sexual abuse were not significantly different between the groups. The online collectors had greater victim empathy. The online collectors had greater sexual deviancy. The online collectors had fewer cognitive distortions, and they had slightly less emotional identification with children. Compared to the general population, both online and offline offenders reported greater risks of childhood physical and sexual abuse themselves. Additionally, online offenders were more likely to be, as I said, Caucasian, younger, single, and unemployed compared to the general population. The authors concluded many of the observed differences can be explained by assuming that online offenders, compared with the offline ones, have greater self-control and more psychological barriers to acting on their deviant interests. Dr. Temperini, who I quoted before in other works, suggested that the risk to commit a hands-on sexual crime results from the interplay between deviant sexual interests, antisocial tendencies, and those difficulties to control behavior. As for motivation behind collecting child pornography, sometimes it's for sexual arousal, whether as a substitute or as a stimulus for sexual offending. Two, as a part of an interest in collecting. Three, and this one seems to come up in virtually everything I read about online pornography users, is that there's a tremendous social incentive to connect with other people who are doing the same thing. There are these what are called peer-to-peer sharing networks, and they've become almost like a social club. And it's a way for a person who has these interests to connect with other people. Unfortunately, it can be the connection with other people who are doing the same thing, which may serve to validate the behaviors and make them seem to the individual not so unique or deviant. Sometimes they're also part of a larger pattern of behavior, including other forms of internet addiction. Now I'm just going to go through a little bit of the typology that I was referring to before. One type of pornography user is considered a browser. And the features of this are that it's a response to spam. Sometimes they accidentally, often this is how it happens, they accidentally hit on a suspicious site, and the material is unknowingly saved. The level of networking by the offender is nil. The use of security measures to try and cover up, it tends to be nil because they're often unaware of the mistake they made. They didn't intend to do that. That's nil. And the nature of the offense is considered indirect. Then there are some people who collect for the desire for private fantasy. That's a conscious creation of online text or digital images. There's also what's called the trawler. That's a person who actively seeks child pornography using openly available browsers. Then there are non-secure collectors. I'm not going to go through all these details, but you get the idea. On to higher levels of abuse that involve contact offenses and also distribution of pornography. Studying pedophilia and child pornography use is difficult for many reasons. First, unless they have been caught, people are not forthcoming about their use or actions, and those that have been caught are not a representative sample of the larger population. So what I was saying before, researchers often look at criminal records, but what someone is charged or convicted of can often only be a part of what they have actually done. Secondly, as noted by Dr. Temperini, the incidence of child pornography offenses has increased as a result of the availability, affordability, and anonymity provided by the internet. Those are the 3 A's that almost every article talks about. Therefore, research done on child pornography users 10 years ago when access was difficult, or 20 years ago before 1995, and required greater determination may not be appropriate today when the access is so much greater. So in conclusion, I would say that ultimately the data on a link between child pornography use and hands-on offenses are equivocal. The forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Temperini, summarized it best. He said, to date, there's no evidence of a direct causal link between internet offending and the commission of contact offenses. In fact, pornography seems to play a role in sexual offenses only in individuals who are predisposed to do so. If the predisposition is present, then pornography use may increase the risk. Otherwise, pornography possession alone does not appear to be a sufficient condition to originate sexual offending. Okay, so maybe I'll stop there. Okay? Okay.
At this time, I'll share with you the questions that have come through my office. And once I work through these questions, if folks here in the audience still have questions for me related to what I share with you, for Dr. Rickler, that would be the time to pose those questions. So we have a series of questions. Number one, what are the Wilton Public School policies in place to prevent those with criminal or other questionable records from gaining employment? Connecticut requires that any person who is hired by a local or regional board of education submit to a state and national criminal history record check. The process includes the checking of fingerprints by the State Police Bureau of Identification and the FBI. The results of the criminal history check, both state and federal, are reported to the district. All employees also submit to an identification check against the DCF Sex Offender Registry. Next question. Post-employment, what procedures are in place to ensure employees remain compliant with policies? In essence, are there post-employment background checks, criminal record monitoring, drug testing, etc.? The same matters that are reviewed prior to hiring. As is the standard for most school districts, there is no policy to conduct post-hiring checks. For non-certified staff, there are currently no procedures in place for ongoing monitoring, although all employees are required to proactively self-report if they are involved in any police-related matters, including motor vehicle issues. The state's attorney must notify the district if a certified staff member is convicted of a crime involving child abuse or neglect. DCF must also notify the district if an allegation of abuse or neglect against a certified staff member is substantiated. Typically, if police become aware of an issue, they may notify the district while the investigation is underway. Certified staff members are monitored by the Connecticut State Department of Education when they apply for recertification. At the time of recertification, DCF reports on whether individuals have any open reports on them. If one is discovered, the district is notified. Generally, if that happens, the employee is placed on administrative leave during the period of the investigation. Are there special or additional pre- or post-employment checks or training for those that work with our most vulnerable children, i.e. the children in our preschool? Presently, the process is the same for all employees. Fingerprinting, criminal and DCF background checks, and careful reference checks are part of the standard process for hiring. How was the pornography in possession of Eric Von Cohorn discovered? Were there pictures of Wilton Public School children? Were the pictures or film resident on Wilton Public School media? We learned on June 11, 2014, that Mr. Von Cohorn was under investigation when officials from the Department of Homeland Security and the Connecticut State Police arrived at Miller Driscoll School to interview him. We learned they had paid a visit to Mr. Von Cohorn's home earlier that day, at which time they confiscated his personal computer. According to Connecticut State Police Detective Carrero, there is currently no evidence to suggest that any Wilton students were involved in Mr. Von Cohorn's activities. With regard to the computer Mr. Von Cohorn used at work, we confiscated his computer on June 11th and have asked officials to determine if any illicit materials have been stored on it. I should note that Mr. Von Cohorn shared a computer with several of his colleagues and did not have sole access to a computer owned by the Wilton Public Schools. When was the Board of Education informed of the circumstances surrounding Eric Von Cohorn's arrest? The board was notified on Thursday, August 14th, which was the day we were notified that an arrest was imminent. Some parents have asked why the district didn't notify parents in the community when it first learned that Mr. Von Cohorn was under investigation. The state police requested that the district keep the information confidential in an effort to protect the integrity of the investigation. Were there any indications prior to the arrest of inappropriate behavior by Eric Von Cohorn? Was Eric Von Cohorn given favorable performance reviews by Wilton Public Schools? There were no obvious indications that Mr. Von Cohorn was involved in any illicit activity, which is why the news has so stunned our preschool community. Mr. Von Cohorn received favorable reviews for each of his 7 years of employment. He had established friendships with many of our staff members, several of whom have expressed feelings of guilt that they did not pick up on that something was awry. There was only one prior matter that involved Mr. Von Cohorn, and it arose from a report a family made in January of 2013 based on a statement made by their child. The report had to do with a toileting concern. The concern was fully investigated by district staff and concluded that Mr. Von Cohorn was not involved in toileting of the child. At the time, the district also reported the matter to DCF. The review conducted by DCF found that the concern did not rise to a level that would necessitate their own investigation. Nevertheless, in light of Mr. Von Cohorn's arrest, we have contacted DCF again and also shared this information with the Wilton Police. I know of no other concerns or questions that were posed prior to the announcement of Mr. Von Cohorn's arrest. Since his arrest, I have been in contact with 2 families who have questioned whether some changes they observed in their children's behavior may be as a result of contact with Mr. Von Cohorn. To answer these questions and questions like this that other families may pose, we have established an intake process led by Mr. Jim Martin, who is here in the back. Jim, could you just give a wave so people can put a face with your name? Jim is one of our clinical social workers. He will gather the information and then coordinate with the families and any other appropriate service provider to investigate further. We understand the expertise needed to appropriately question small children and want to ensure that we coordinate with experts in the region who are able to do this should the need arise. We will also continue to share any information that is learned with DCF and with the Wilton Police. Have there been other employees that have been investigated because of questionable behavior? Periodically, parents or others may make complaints against teachers, paraeducators, or other employees. Each complaint is investigated following a specific protocol which includes a scripted interview of all involved, the accused, the accuser, and any potential witnesses. If there are reasonable grounds to believe that abuse or neglect occurred, a report is made to DCF. Upon completion of the process, a determination is made, and if appropriate, disciplinary proceedings are initiated. What policies and procedures are in place in the pre-K program to preserve the safety and dignity of our children, and what are the preschool's protocols for toileting? This comes right from the preschool manual. Our goals regarding our toileting protocol are to keep children safe, respect their dignity, and take precautions to ensure that staff are appropriately supervised. The protocols read as follows. 2 staff members should be present in the bathroom when supervising groups of preschool children. If only 1 staff member is available, staff should stand at the doorway of the bathroom to supervise the group of preschool children. If a preschool child needs adult assistance with toileting, the staff providing the assistance needs to, number 1, inform the classroom teacher that he or she is taking the preschool child to the bathroom. Number 2, leave the door of the bathroom partially open when assisting the preschool child in the bathroom. Number 3, when changing a child's diaper, the bathroom door must be left partially open. Staff should be visible from the hallway, but the child's privacy must be assured. D, male staff may not supervise female children in the bathroom, no exceptions. E, administration and related service staff should periodically check bathrooms. Now, the second part of the question. The preschool is located in a highly trafficked section of the building. Preschool and Miller Driscoll staff, custodians, cafeteria workers, and parents are often visible throughout the preschool area. Many students and staff from Miller Driscoll travel through the preschool on their way to the North Cafeteria for lunch. Therapists often work one-on-one with children, but there are windows and one-way mirrors in these offices allowing for viewing in the therapy room from the hallway. Occupational, physical, and speech and language therapists may engage in physical strategies or prompts such as stretching, oral motor exercises, etc., as part of a student's individual education plan. Parents are aware that these techniques are being utilized with their child and often either observe the therapist administering the technique or receive training on how to administer them at home. Further, staff and student schedules are on file in the preschool office and with each classroom teacher. This allows the preschool administrator to know where everyone is expected to be. Random checks of bathrooms, classrooms, playground, and therapy rooms are made for confirmation. Finally, when the preschool administrator is away from the building, another administrator assumes responsibility for the preschool. Next question. In what classrooms had Mr. Von Cohorn worked? Mr. Von Cohorn has worked most recently in both Miss Dawn's and Miss Neville's classrooms. In previous years, he was assigned to both Miss Huff's and Miss Blair's classrooms. What does a notice to the Connecticut DCF entail? The state of Connecticut requires anyone engaged in a profession that involves regular interaction with children to report to the Department of Children and Families any suspected child abuse, neglect, or any instances in which a child has been placed in imminent danger. Within our schools, the list of mandated reporters includes teachers, administrators, cafeteria workers, nurses, paraprofessionals, coaches, and the list goes on. The state requires that this report be made within 12 hours of becoming aware of a possible incident. Once the DCF has been notified, an evaluation is made to determine if the case warrants an investigation. That determination can be made within a matter of hours in extreme cases, but all investigations must be completed within 30 days. If the DCF concludes that there is a reasonable cause to believe a school employee has harmed a child or put a child at risk, the employing superintendent is immediately notified. The superintendent must immediately suspend the employee and notify the Board of Education. What counseling services will be provided by Wilton Public Schools to families of pre-K children to manage the anxiety or pain of this event? Parents are encouraged to contact our clinical social worker, Mr. Jim Martin, who just gave you a wave a moment ago, who's available to discuss any specific concerns a parent may have. In addition, Dr. Rickler, who is with us this evening, will also be in school during tomorrow's Meet the Teacher Day. Dr. Rickler will be on site from 9 to 10:30 a.m. tomorrow for any confidential discussions you might wish to have. What actions should parents take should they believe their children may have been mistreated? A parent should not hesitate to contact either Preschool Director Fred Rapaczynski, Assistant Superintendent for Special Services Ann Paul, Principal Cheryl Jensen-Gerner, or any member of our social services or counseling staff. All of these individuals are trained to handle allegations of this nature and will treat a parent's concerns seriously and thoroughly. Also, a parent should never worry about confidentiality. Our staff understands the need to protect our family's right to confidentiality I wish to emphasize that if a parent has any issue or suspicion that something is not right, it's always better to pick up the phone and share your concerns than to find out later that your suspicions were correct. Is there a standing protocol for informing Wilton Public Schools should parents have concerns about the environment at the preschool? Our hope is that parents understand to contact either Preschool Director Fred Rapaczynski, Assistant Superintendent Ann Paul, Principal Cheryl Jensen-Gerner, or any member of our social services and counseling staff. However, please be assured that steps will be taken to ensure that a written document is disseminated that details a precise course of action should any questions or questionable activity arise. Which authorities have been involved in the current situation, and what are their roles? Our initial point of contact was with the Department of Homeland Security and the Connecticut State Police, who on June 11th made us aware that Mr. Von Cohorn was under investigation. At that point, we contacted the Wilton Police so that School Resource Officer Rich Ross and Chief Michael Lombardo would be aware and appropriately involved. We also reported the matter to the Connecticut Department of Children and Families. The investigation continues to be managed by federal and state officials. Beyond the investigation of Mr. Von Cohorn, we have enlisted the services of mental health professionals to help with our staff and parent community who have been saddened and shocked by these developments. Dr. Rickler is with us this evening and will be in the building tomorrow morning to speak confidentially with any parent or staff member. We are also making available our clinical social worker, Mr. Jim Martin, as a resource. This employee was here for 7 years. What is being done to make sure he didn't harm children in Wilton at any point in that time period? At no time during Mr. Von Cohorn's tenure in Wilton did we have reason to suspect that he was engaged in any illegal or inappropriate behavior. He had no disciplinary actions in his personnel file and no reports from staff members claiming to have witnessed inappropriate behavior. During the course of their investigation, the Connecticut State Police seized his home computer and found nothing to indicate that any Wilton students were harmed. If any parent comes forward to ask questions about the possibility that he behaved inappropriately with the parent's child, it will be investigated thoroughly. We are in daily contact with the Wilton Police Department, who will be charged with all those investigations. At this point, parent and staff input is our primary means of determining whether or not any of our students were directly harmed. We have encouraged anyone who believes that they may have information about improper behavior to contact either Fred and Paul, Jim Martin, and Dr. Rickler will also be here tomorrow. What are the board and administration going to do to make sure this isn't happening elsewhere in the district right now and that it won't happen again? We have initiated a review of all policies and procedures to ensure that no breakdowns in protocol occurred. As I mentioned earlier, every Wilton employee undergoes a rigorous background check in which we search for any criminal records, as well as reports filed with Connecticut DCF. Once an individual is hired, there are federal and state mandates that require direct supervision. In addition, district policies are in place with regard to circumstances in which a paraprofessional may be in an unaccompanied situation with a student. We are confident that adequate policies and procedures are in place. We are now in the process of ensuring that all staff members adhere to these requirements. That said, please keep in mind that Mr. Von Cohorn's alleged activities took place away from school. And while we have strict internet usage protocols for all in-district computers, we ultimately cannot control what an individual does during their non-working hours. Mr. Von Cohorn developed many close relationships with staff members who were shocked to learn that their friend was apparently engaged in this behavior. As much as we can create a safe environment within our buildings, we cannot control what goes on outside our walls. I should like to add that we will be working with Dr. Rapaczynski and trying to better understand how staff members are deployed throughout the day and take any further steps to ensure that there is adequate peer supervision while students are in the building. A number of parents have wondered about the content of the photos that Mr. Von Cohorn was allegedly viewing. According to Special Agent Allison Himela of the Department of Homeland Security, the images were a mix of both boys and girls with an age range of 5 to 13. How did the state police know that no Wilton children were involved? Based on what was collected, they have found no evidence to suggest Mr. Von Cohorn was producing images. Detective Carrero noted that as part of his investigations into these matters, he sees many of the same images over and over again. In our conversation, he reported that he did not recall seeing any images he hadn't seen in the past. Detective Carrera also noted that all of the images they recover are sent to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who keep a database of identified children. Once the center reviews all of the images, they will send a report back to the state police detailing whether any of those images were new. On a related note, as I mentioned at the start, the attorney representing Mr. Von Cohorn called me to share that Mr. Von Cohorn volunteered to submit to a polygraph test. According to his attorney, the results of that polygraph supported the belief that he did not physically harm any children. How long was the investigation going on prior to June 11th? According to State Police Detective John Carrero, Mr. Von Cohorn became known to them in April 2014. What tipped investigators off to look at Mr. Von Cohorn in the first place? Again, according to Detective John Carrero, it was his participation on a peer-to-peer file network. Was his cell phone confiscated by the police? The search warrant focused on his house. His cell phone was not in the house the day that the police searched. I spoke with Detective Carrero today, and as of right now, Mr. Von Cohorn's cell phone was not confiscated. At the moment, those are the questions we've received. Those are the answers we have. If you have any further questions, currently I would invite you to come to the microphone and we'll do our best to respond. I want to, oh, sir.
I think the preschool children are so young, so they cannot do much to protect themselves. So I still encourage to use video cameras in the classrooms. I know it may harm the morale of the staff and the teacher, but they are just so young, so they cannot do anything to protect themselves if something gets wrong. And also, from my understanding of the case, there's almost nothing wrong with the other administrator of his school, I mean Dr. R or his colleagues. So I think you guys still should cheer up. You still did a good job overall. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my point.
Great. Thank you very much for your feedback. Sir.
Yeah, hi. I'm wondering how to reconcile a couple of things you said, which seem to me to be at least potentially inconsistent. And my question is, you said, I think a couple of times, as well as in the written statement that you deployed, that you have no reason to believe that there was any inappropriate contact between this guy and Wilton students. But I thought you also said there was an event in January of 2013 where there was a complaint made of inappropriate contact or conduct or something. Can you just tell us how you reconcile those two things, which seem inherently to be inconsistent?
Sure. The report from the incident in January of 2013 found that Mr. Von Cohorn was not involved. He wasn't in the bathroom and did not toilet the child. That's the information we have so far.
Okay, and just as a quick follow-up to the question, thank you for indulging me. What was the nature of the complaint? Without revealing, obviously, anything that might compromise privacy, because that should not be done, obviously.
It was a toileting concern.
What does that mean?
You're at a point where I'm walking the line of confidentiality, and it would be concerned about the way that adults assist a child being toileted. Mr. Von Cohorn did not toilet the child. That was the finding of the investigation.
Was it a complaint that he did inappropriately toilet a child?
It wasn't a complaint. It was a question based on a statement that the child made. And, sir, I really can't go any further than that. I would like to add, though, through an abundance of caution, we're looking at all of these things. So we have gone back to DCF to feed all that information to them. We've also passed that information forward to the Wilton, Police Department to take another look, just to be as safe and sound and sure as we can be about that information contained in the investigation report.
Do the authorities have any idea of a time frame of when this online behavior occurred?
I don't have that information.
And they don't know? Was there an officer
I will
here
follow
who's
up
investigating?
with, unless, Rich Yoon, I didn't have a chance to speak. Did you speak to Detective Carrero?
I have not been able to speak with him about that, but again, our agency did not investigate it, so I do not have that information.
I'll call his office tomorrow and follow up with that question. So we're looking for the time frame. the behavior occurred. Okay. Hi.
Is there currently a restraining order against him coming to the school? And is his picture made public? I know the bus drivers don't know what he looks like, but
The district has not disseminated any pictures. To the best of my knowledge, he may not come to Wilton Public Schools.
but is there an official thing other than?
I don't know if there's an official restraining order, but that's another
Okay.
question I'll feed back to the detective and verify. Sir?
Hi, I have two questions. Just to follow up on her question, is that, so has the picture been distributed to other people in the school at least? That they know that he's not allowed on the premises or anything like that? Like, is he allowed on the premises?
He's not allowed on the premises. We have not distributed his photo.
Is that going to be happening?
I will discuss this with our staff, and if it's an appropriate step, I'll certainly take it.
Okay, and the second question, I'm a bit concerned about the cell phone, the fact that his cell phone wasn't taken or
Yes.
confiscated. Is there a policy in the school as to what teachers can and cannot do with their cell phones? Can they bring them, do you have to keep them in a particular location? They're allowed to bring them to the bathrooms, things like that?
We don't have clear-cut policies at the moment that dictate what staff can do with their cell phones, but as part of our review, we will certainly be addressing that.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for hosting the session. Can you at the very least classify whether or not the January 2013 complaint was a sexual or non-sexual concern?
I can't.
Okay.
All I can say is it involved the toileting of a child, and that the investigation found that Mr. Von Cohorn did not toilet the child.
Okay. Did your peer-to-peer supervision or your peer supervision program with Mr. Von Cohorn, did you supervise him any differently after, I guess, this initial red flag surfaced in January 2013?
I don't have the answer to that question. I'm going to say I believe not, because the investigation revealed that Mr. Von Cohorn wasn't in the bathroom with the child.
Okay.
Or didn't toilet the child.
Okay, and last question for me. I guess for better or for worse, the staff understands which children have more problems communicating and
Right.
less problems communicating, and it can make them very easy prey, unfortunately. I guess it seems like amid that, and given that these children won't be able to give any kind of a credible testimony either to their parents or to police officers or to teachers, if there is something inappropriate going on, I would strongly encourage to maybe create an environment where there is no one-on-one, teachers in a bathroom with students or in an isolated environment for more than, 20 seconds or something, just because if these kids can't, advocate for themselves or stand up for themselves or even testify, there's nobody that knows what really happened except for that faculty member.
Right. Thank
I
you.
just strongly encourage that.
Appreciate the
Thanks.
feedback.
Hi. I have two questions. One, when you mentioned cell phone, it brought to mind, is there a policy in the district regarding staff and their smartphones? Because it seems to me that's a huge vulnerability as a means of exposing children and immediately posting it. And so I'm curious if there's any policy.
Right. The policies we have a responsible use policy that really governs internet-based technology and what teachers and students might do. The other policy, the practice that we have in place is if any parent requests that a child not be photographed, we honor that.
Right. It's just the notion of somebody having a cell phone in their pocket as they're escorting a child to the bathroom seems a little
Of course.
disconcerting.
And I think that's something that, I know for a fact that's something we're really going to take a hard look at.
Okay, thank you. Question two is regarding the qualifications that the district looks at when hiring somebody for, as another gentleman said, a very vulnerable population, given that oftentimes they are nonverbal. Mr. Von Cohorn's education, he had no formal education relating to his job.
Correct.
He had certificates in bartending and broadcasting, not really relevant. He had 2 years of preschool experience elsewhere, but that's really not something. I remember 7 years ago looking at this when he was assigned to work with my child, looking at his resume and thinking, I don't really see how this person, and this is unrelated to the present day, how this person is qualified to be a special ed para. Maybe a recess guy, yes, but a special ed para with a very vulnerable population. So what is the criteria for hiring?
Great. I'm going to refer that question to Ms. Paul, since the paraprofessionals are part of her staff. Anne, do you mind taking that?
Well, we look at a number of factors when we interview our paraprofessional staff. We look at someone who obviously has a demonstrated interest in working with children. We look at someone who has a work history with reliability, who's shown good interpersonal skills and a willingness to learn. Some of our paraprofessionals certainly need additional training in working with children with special needs, and so the willingness to learn and pursue their education in that way, or we look a lot for the qualitative features in hiring someone.
Okay. I guess to me, obviously hindsight's always 20/20, but when you look at somebody who has no educational background and really very little experience in that area, it maybe might send up a red flag as to their motives for such a job. That's just what comes to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I believe maybe Dr. Rickler would be able to answer this. You gave us a lot of research tonight, and I appreciate that, Dr. Rickler. Maybe you could look into this. How many convicted online child pornographic users have a work history that includes working as a caregiver in a preschool, compared to the number of convicted child molesters? I'm sure there's some research out there, and you could provide us with that information.
Could I ask you just to read that one more time? I'm just trying to capture it. So it's how many
convicted online child pornographic users have a work history that includes working as a caregiver in a preschool, compared to the number of convicted child molesters that have also had a similar work history as a caregiver in a preschool, that type of setting?
I'll certainly be happy to try and look into it. I can tell you, though, over the past 4 days, I have reviewed hundreds of articles. I can't tell you how much I've looked at about this subject. In addition to that, I've consulted with a number of other people who are very familiar with this area. One person is a Dr. Leslie Lothstein, who is in West Hartford. He very willingly gave of his time to consult with me so I could pick his brain about some of these subjects. He has done numerous evaluations for courts on the issue of perpetrators. He's written a number of books about sexual abuse among clergy. And I have to say, in all of our discussions, your question hasn't come up. In addition to that, a lot of the, because I want to give credit where credit is due, not only to Dr. Lothstein, but a lot of the background research work, because it was just way too much for one person to comb through, there's just so much out there, was done by my son, who happens to be a researcher in public health, and he helped to put together the document that I've been working from in our work together over the past few days. And again, that question hasn't come up. So I'm certainly willing to look into it, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to answer it for you.
Okay.
I will tell you, though, that one other thing I did learn, and this sort of is tangentially related to your question, is that, and is a bit off topic from why we're here tonight, but I think it touches on what you're saying about people having contact with children. 90% of contact child sexual abuse happens within the familiar setting of a family. So the actual number of offenses...
The school is like a family.
That's true, but I'm just telling you what the statistical numbers, I'm not debating,
Right.
you know, the figurative connection here, but statistically...
No, I'm talking
most of
about the
them-
emotional connection that the children have with the teachers and with the paraprofessionals, and they trust them. And a sacred bond of trust was broken. And that's it.
Hi.
This is a question for Ms. Paul and Dr. R. With regards to communication, I didn't receive any information with regards to this. I had to find out from a friend. So I'm concerned that this hasn't been widely communicated, especially to parents who may have previously been within this school and are no longer within the school. How extensive of a communication did you actually put out?
Sure, all the communication came from my office, and we distributed it through our computer systems to every contact we had. I can't tell you specifically if it went through Edline or PowerSchool. We used School Messenger, so whatever contacts were housed in there, I believe School Messenger draws from PowerSchool.
But that's just current parents, right?
I think, you know, you'll have to forgive, that's the system we opted to use for this, and so if I missed a group of people, it certainly wasn't intentional. I have been speaking with the local media and trying to put information out as best I'm able.
Okay. In terms of trying to figure out the extensiveness of what has occurred, if you haven't reached out to parents who have been there for the past 7 years, how do you know whether or not there have been other incidents?
That's a great question, and you know, until you just raised it, I wasn't aware that there may have been some people in the community who had kids in the school, but maybe not in the school any longer. So I'll go back and I'll take a look at all those contacts when I get in tomorrow and see if there's another group that we need to push the information out to.
Okay. With regards to the investigation, several times it's been stated that there's no evidence that anything occurred within the school, but it also sounds like the Wilton Police didn't investigate anything, that the state police and the Homeland Security were investigating what was done on a computer, but there hasn't been any investigation as to the actual school.
That's correct. That's factually accurate. This investigation originated with the Connecticut State Police and the Department of Homeland Security. The focus of their investigation was Mr. Von Cohorn's online activities. When we published that out to the community, as I mentioned before, there are 2 families who have come forward with questions based on observing some changes that they've seen in their children. So that information we have shared with the police, and so they're working with those families, we're working with those families, and that's where the investigation that the police here in town will conduct as we learn that kind of information.
Isn't that, though, a bit misleading, though, to say that there is no evidence? I mean, that's a very definitive statement, that there's no evidence, and while there may be no evidence, if you haven't conducted an investigation, how can you definitively state that no child was involved?
The state police have reported that they have no evidence to suggest based on their investigation. As I said before, we are at this point, we have not had any evidence to suggest or information to suggest that Mr. Von Cohorn could have been inappropriate with kids, and that's part of the reason we're here tonight, is to engage with parents, and if folks are concerned, to ask them to come forward so we can begin that process.
I'm just trying to understand, it sounds like there's 2 different investigations, though. One that would be with regards to his computer.
That's the
that-
state police.
Right, and then one that would be related to the school, which has not commenced yet.
That we are gathering information and we are sharing that information with the police. And we've asked the police to make contacts with families who are posing questions as I've just described.
Right, so that's where I'm concerned, because if you have parents like myself and other parents who haven't been contacted, that to say there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever just seems very misleading.
Fair enough.
And I'm concerned because I know that there've been other issues with other employees who are apparently terminated for criminal activity, and that was sort of swept under the rug and not made public.
I can
So-
only address what I have in front of me. If there's some information that you want to share, I would ask that you can contact me directly. You can contact Ms. Paul, Jim Martin, if you like. If you have information, I'd be happy to share it. And if you're concerned, as you mentioned before, about reaching out to other parents, I'll go back tomorrow, as I said, and I'll look at whatever contact distribution list we have and try to push it out further if there are people that we missed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Smith, I want to thank you and everybody that's here for your transparency with us tonight. I know that this is difficult for all of us. I do have a couple questions I wanted to ask. You were very specific when you spoke earlier about Attorney Sheffield's communication with you today about the polygraph. And I believe what you said is that Mr. Von Cohorn clearly stated that he did not physically harm our children, Wilton school children. Was there a question asked about whether he took photographs of any Wilton school children?
I don't have the list of questions that were asked, and somebody else had raised that after I shared that. I called Attorney Sheffield back to ask that specific question. I haven't been in touch with him, but know that I hope to be in touch with him tomorrow and ask that specific question. Once I get that answer, I will publish it.
Okay, I have a few follow-up questions related to it. I perhaps naively assumed that part of the investigation included looking at his cell phone and images that may have been on his cell phone. Do you have any understanding of what steps would be taken to review content that's on his cell phone or may have been on his cell phone?
I don't have any information to speak to that question.
Could you ask that question and see if you can get any information?
I certainly will.
Two last questions, and these are relatively quick. I'm aware of the fact that there are more than 50 images. Are you able to quantify for us how many images there were?
I don't have the exact number, just that there were more than 50.
Okay. You can't tell me if it's like 1,000 or 1,000,000.
I truly don't know.
Okay. And were there any photographs that didn't include faces?
I don't. The characterizations of the photographs that I have are just what I explained to you. According to Special Agent Hamela, she said that there was a mix of genders, and she gave me the age range between maybe 5 and 13.
Okay. I said this to some folks earlier today. I've spoken with Jim, and I've spoken with Dr. Fred and some other people, and I will say that I feel like your nightmare is probably worse than the reality in some ways. And so the more information that can be made available to parents of kids at the preschool or folks that were at the preschool previously would be greatly appreciated. And again, thank you all for all of your efforts. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for the feedback. Hi.
Hi, I just want to say as well, thank you for being here tonight. I am a little disappointed that there's no representation from someone who seems to be actually conducting the investigation, because I really did come tonight not to make you feel defensive about the preschool, but to get more information. I can understand how it happened, that this man was hired, that he cleared his background checks, that aside from something, I don't know, in 2013, there were no red flags. But now I really want to know what happened. And my son is not the most communicative child. And when he started, he wasn't really verbal. So trying to get information from him is very hard. So I would really like to hear from a detective what kind of, what it is that they've been asking him. I'd like to hear more information as far as what kind of questions they're going to be asking Mr. Cohorn's colleagues that they may have witnessed. In retrospect, hindsight, maybe that was kind of weird. I'd like to know how much and how often he had the possibility of being alone with any children, specifically my child. I need some help with guiding questions to ask my son. I can ask him, like, did you like Mr. Eric? But he says, yes, I loved him. My son loves almost everyone. So I need information about how to go about this, and I need more information from the police.
Okay.
I feel like as a parent my son was so young and vulnerable, we have a right to more information than the public at large. So I can understand that, in June, they didn't want to tell us about him because they didn't want to harm the investigation. But at this point, I need more.
Okay. All right. I will do my best to follow up on your questions.
Hi, I read an article in the Wilton papers, which probably a lot of people did, and I thought there was two parts of the arrest, or there was something about
2 charges.
2 charges.
Correct.
And that wasn't discussed, the second charge, which
The-
was promoting,
Right. That's the legal expression of the charge. That charge is related to either sharing or trading pictures online. My understanding from Detective Carrero is through this peer-to-peer network that Mr. Von Cohorn was allegedly participating in, that he was viewing and then perhaps trading or sharing.
oh, that's the promoting part, I guess.
Correct.
And then also, this could be wrong, but my husband had seen, he had gotten an alert on his Facebook or something about there was some drugs or something at first, or was that just a mistake, or no one's...
That didn't come from my office.
Like the investigation started out in that direction or something? I could be wrong about that, but he said that's how he first found out about it.
That's news to me.
That was like breaking news, or like...
Yeah, the information that I had from the detectives that the investigation was really specific to Mr. Von Cohorn's online activities.
Okay, thanks.
Hello.
Forgive me, I'm like a terrible public speaker. You had touched on it just a little bit about the investigation and how everything kind of played out. You had said that things first came to light for the detectives in April.
Correct.
So with that being said, aren't you rip-roaring mad that they didn't inform the Wilton school system that this man is in a position that he's in, caring for our children? I have a child with special needs in the preschool, and she was in his class at that time. So I've also had 2 other children go through as typical children, and one of them was in all of his classes, and it was my son. So I have a lot of concern, obviously. When we spoke earlier about the number of images, that terrifies me just because, the detectives say no Wilton, at this time they don't believe anyone was, affected by it, but at the same time, without having a picture of all of our children so that they can compare, it's hard as a parent to say, how can you say,
Sure.
How can you say
Completely understood.
So, I don't know, I felt like I needed to get that out, and definitely when it came to the investigation and how it played out, that really just concerned me that they allowed him to stay in that position.
Okay, I think, what I'm hearing is certainly there's a desire for more information directly from Detective Carrero, so I'll reach out to him tomorrow, and I can't make any commitment tonight, but perhaps it would be helpful to have him come and speak to preschool parents and just talk through
Absolutely.
some of the elements of the investigation that you have questions about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Please. Oh, thank you.
I could also tell you something about what I learned about the photos, because a parent might say, for example, if Mr. Von Cohorn took a picture of my child from the neck down, how would anybody know that that is not them as opposed to any other image? Perhaps that's what people are wondering about. What I learned in researching this is apparently there is an incredible police, FBI, Homeland Security dragnet to catch users of child pornography who go beyond that accidental hit or download something without realizing necessarily what they have. And photos, the FBI puts up known photos that have been in circulation. These photos, I'm told, are encrypted. So as a result, it has a GPS on it. And that's how they can identify, as Dr. Smith was saying before, that's how they've been able to identify and compare ones supposedly that were on Mr. Von Cohorn's computer compared to ones that are known. The experience that I've had in my practice and has been true of a number of child psychiatrists is that teenagers who have dabbled in downloading child pornography for whatever reason, and we have to remember that federally that is considered images under 18. Many of them have been arrested, and that's so it's relatively easy to get caught. Now, that's not to say that there aren't going to be some people who slip through the cracks, but as was explained to me, that's the methodology.
My son had been in the preschool 7 years ago, had worked with Eric, and I thought if I heard more information about the nature of the photographs, I'd feel better, but that hasn't worked so much. I take a great deal of comfort, though, in knowing how the preschool is run, and I think that program is flat out one of the best programs we have in the district. And I've seen Miss Dawn work with the kids, the way it's structured, how they work together. I'm heartbroken for Fred and the whole staff and the fact that you're getting this attention, because the program is amazing. And what it has done for my child has been amazing. And I guess I want to keep staying with the thought, this is all stuff that happened at home. It all happened at home. And that's what we know at this point. So, Fred, thanks for going through everything you're going through.
If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening. As you have more specific questions, please continue to reach out. As we learn more information, we will do the same and continue to publish it. And I look forward to seeing you all under much more positive circumstances in the future. Thank you.